All right, let's get started. All right, the test will always start with read and select questions. So you will have to select the real English words. And Duolingo tries to trick you by putting words that sound real or that have spelling mistakes. So we'll see some examples. Greatly, that sounds like a real word. However, it is not. Missile, that is a real word. Top, that's a real word. Tipo, no. Salt, yes. Sensity, no. Unaphilical, no. Snome, no. Installation, yes. Misfortune, yes. Sarcastic, yes. Ginner, no. King, yes. Delete, no. Incliter, no. Sacred, yes. Tenning, no. Interestingly, yes. And then you'll move on to fill in the blanks. So you'll have one word that is missing letters, and you have to type in those missing letters. Here we go. The company received many applications in blank to the job ad they had posted online in response. So typically for fill in the blanks, which we have a whole masterclass about, it will be part of a phrase very often. So here, many applications in response, that's a phrase or a collocation. All right, here's another one. Blank, our team has a better chance of winning the game tomorrow, considering our record of previous victories. So statistically, I figured this one out because it's talking about chances of winning. It's talking about numbers. In a courtroom scenario, the defense and prosecution present opposing opposite arguments to the jury. So I first thought that it was opposing, but you can see that that doesn't fit. I think it has to be opposite. When it comes to holiday planning, they're always stubborn instead of being cooperative with everyone else's ideas. So this is another thing with fill in the blanks is sometimes you will be given a synonym or an antonym, which means the opposite. So here, the opposite of stubborn is cooperative. Ever since the release, their new album has been met with universal acclaim. This is an example of a phrase or a collocation. Universal acclaim is a very common collocation in English. So once I saw acclaim, once I saw universal, then I knew that the answer was acclaim very easily. The blank buttons on his uniform glinted in the morning sun. The brass buttons on his uniform. So brass is like a gold material that buttons are commonly made of. That's quite an advanced word. The inexperienced scientist focused on factors that were not central to the research questions irrelevantly. So were not central to the research questions. That is a synonym for irrelevantly. That's how I got that one. In a fixed layout, the positions and sizes of elements on a web page do not change. This one I knew because of the collocation, so I didn't even read the rest of the sentence. I was very confident that it had to be a fixed layout because I've seen that phrase many times. The students, about the homework they were given, grumbled. So grumbled means complain, be unhappy about. So students never like homework, especially over the weekend, and therefore I was able to figure out grumbled. All right, and then we move on to the next section, the third section, which is when we have three question types that are mixed together. So read and complete, listen and type, and read aloud. Here we go.
I became a software engineer after college.
So for these questions, this is listen and type. I recommend that on the first listen, you really focus, you try your best, and then you try to type as much as you remember. Then you're going to use your second listen to try to fill in what you didn't understand, and then complete your response. And then on the third listen, you proofread your response and make sure you have everything correct. That's what I would recommend. So,
I became a software engineer after college.
I became a software engineer after college. Then I will use my final listen to proofread.
I became a software engineer after college.
There we go. That's correct. On the DET, you don't get more points for going faster, so there's no reason to rush here. You can take your time and allow the entire question, the time for the whole question to pass, to get a little bit of a break if you want. It won't impact your score. All right. These move pretty quick, the read aloud, so let me go ahead and record myself. And if you need any help, please don't hesitate to ask me for additional feedback.
Besides lending books, libraries offer various other services.
Besides lending books, libraries offer various other services. Okay, let's use the second listen, although there aren't any parts I'm not confident about, so I'm going to just proofread.
Besides lending books, libraries offer various other services.
Okay, and then again, we don't gain points for going faster, so I'm going to use the third listen, because why not?
Besides lending books, libraries offer various other services.
Great. And in order to get full marks, you will need to have the correct punctuation. So besides lending books, comma, libraries offer various other services, so you should include commas where they are needed. All right, this is read and complete. So it's like fill in the blanks, except harder because there are multiple words that are missing letters. And so we'll have to fill in all of those. So what I suggest is just try to get the easy ones first, but don't be afraid to skip a word and keep going, because once you have more of the other words, then you can come back to the difficult ones and use the words you've already filled in to help you. So the other thing, to note here is you're always given a title, and the first sentence and the last sentence will always be complete. So you should always read the title, first sentence, and the last sentence. That gives you really helpful context about what the passage is about, which will help you to figure out what those incomplete words are. So this passage is about environmental protection. The first sentence, environmental protection is the stewardship and conservation of natural resources in support of long-term ecological health. Environmental protection activities include land use planning and wildlife management. So constructive management, this is common, by the way, that a incomplete word will appear in the first sentence, the last sentence, or the title. So management and management. Okay. Constructive management practices are vital to maintain or enhance the economic value of these resources. Effective management, again, so that's the third time we've seen that word now, is also necessary to safeguard environmental quality. Environmental, that's a word that we saw in the title and in the first sentence and in the last sentence as well. Okay, so they're not going to be always new words. The three main goals of environmental protection are to sustain productive ecosystems, conserve biodiversity, and protect air and water quality. So in that case, I didn't have any challenging words that I couldn't figure out the first time, but if I did, I would have skipped those words, and now I would come back to those words and try to figure them out. What you should always do and save time for 20 or 30 seconds is to proofread your response, because maybe I got the right answer, but I just mistyped one letter. So let me do that now. Constructive management practices are vital to maintain or enhance the economic value of these resources. Effective management is also necessary to safeguard environmental quality. The three main goals of environmental protection are to sustain productive ecosystems, conserve biodiversity, and protect air and water quality. That's all correct.
The company prioritized the use of recycled materials during the manufacturing process.
The company prioritized the use of recycled materials during the manufacturing process. Okay, let's use the second listen. So let's say, for example, you didn't quite catch this word. On the second listen, that's when you would really pay attention to what's said at that word to figure it out.
The company prioritized the use of recycled materials during the manufacturing process.
Okay, and then we could figure out that it was manufacturing. All right, let's just use the third listen because why not?
The company prioritized the use of recycled materials during the manufacturing process.
That's correct. All right, so notice how I'm going to read this. I'm going to enunciate or pronounce each word very carefully. During a redox reaction, some atoms gain electrons, while others lose electrons.
You are a school teacher, aren't you?
You are a school teacher, aren't you? Now, notice how this word was a contraction. These do appear on listen and type questions, and you are expected to type the contraction. So if you put are not, that would not be 100% correct, and you will lose a few points. So you should type contractions. So let's listen one more time, and you can hear the contraction.
You are a school teacher, aren't you?
There you go. You are a school teacher, aren't you? And notice how this was a question. So I also need to include that question mark.
You are a school teacher, aren't you?
And there we go. All right, this is a long one, so let me give myself plenty of time. Authentic learning is an approach that emphasizes the application of knowledge and skills in real-world contexts.
Despite graduating years ago, he still has access to his university email account.
Despite graduating years ago, comma, he still has access to his university email account. Okay, listen to it second time.
Despite graduating years ago, he still has access to his university email account.
So if you're not sure where commas should go, it's where there's a slight pause when the person is speaking. So listen between a go and he, and you'll hear she pauses very briefly.
Despite graduating years ago, he still has access to his university email account.
Okay, so that can help you to figure out where to put commas. However, if you're not sure, don't worry about it. It's not going to lose you a lot of points if you don't put a comma. It probably won't impact your score much, if at all. Modern methods of construction offer benefits such as increased strength and durability.
I felt very sorry that I had put them to so much trouble.
I had put them to so much trouble. So in this one, he says that I had put them to so much trouble. At least that's what I heard. The thing is, that is weird, right? Usually this word is through. So I'm going to listen and see what he says here.
I felt very sorry that I had put them to so much trouble.
To be honest, I can't tell. It really sounds like to. However, that is not a common phrase. I've never heard really anybody say that in English. So I'm going to say that he says through, but he's pronouncing it in a weird way.
I felt very sorry that I had put them to so much trouble.
And now you may have noticed that I had a typo here, which I only spotted on the third listen. All right, our company was founded, let me read the title. Experts in High Precision Machine Tools. Our company was founded in the engineering town of Pittsburgh in 1850 as a maker of lathes, the machines used to turn a workpiece around a rotational axis, and has been in business for over 150 years. Since then, we've become renowned as makers of precision tools tools. I already have a typo, so let me fix this. Tools and as pioneers in technology. While our focus is still on manufacturing machine tools, our product line has expanded to include a wider range of high-performance equipment and services for a variety of applications in recent years. This is another one I was able to get correct the first time through, right? But let's say, for example, that I couldn't figure out this one. Well, now that I've figured out the rest of the passage, it's going to be much easier to figure out what this incomplete word is. So that's the general strategy for this one. And then let me proofread my response, just make sure that everything is correct. Since then, we've become renowned as makers of precision machine tools and as pioneers in technology. While our focus is still on manufacturing machine tools, our product line has expanded to include a wider range of high-performance equipment and services for a variety of applications in recent years.
Their first day at work was successful.
Their first day at work was successful. Now, I'm going to put an exclamation mark because that, when he read the passage, he sounded excited, with a lot of energy. So I think an exclamation mark is appropriate. I think that Duolingo is testing me on that. So let's listen the second time and see if you can hear what I'm talking about.
Their first day at work was successful.
Right? Their first day at work was successful. He's excited. So that's why I'm going to put the exclamation mark. Again, if I'm wrong, I'm not worried. I don't think it's going to lose me points or very many points. I don't think it's going to impact my score. So I'm going to put it. And then let's use the third listen.
Their first day at work was successful.
And there we go. No typos. I've been working on my application and trying to make it as strong as possible.
I expected green lawns and quiet streets in the suburbs.
I expected green lawns and quiet streets in the suburbs.
I expected green lawns and quiet streets in the suburbs. I expected green lawns and quiet streets in the suburbs.
Now, I'm confident that this is correct, so I'm going to go to the next question. But again, don't rush on the test. You don't gain points by going faster. So I could just sit and wait, relax, take a break, because the questions can be very quick on the test. So if you get an opportunity to give yourself a little break and calm down, that can be a good idea. Oh, this is a long one. Among the numerous benefits, bicycles are incredibly cost-effective and economically advantageous, both for individuals and city infrastructure. While you could have been a viable, read the title, always, a problematic resume, while you could have been a viable candidate, you lack the prerequisite desiderata? I've never seen that word, honestly. We suspect you may have fabricated completely their relationships with you. Okay, so we're talking about somebody's resume or CV, and apparently there's maybe some forgery or fake information. Your resume is somewhat overblown So we strongly recommend that you dial back the grandiose statements. Grandiose means grand, big, exaggerated. On the, on top of that, your references are too illustrious. Okay. So we had definitely some advanced vocabulary here. Grandiose, illustrious, somewhat, I think could have been tricky. We also, I think, had maybe just as many incomplete words as we had words that were complete. So this one was a tough one, even though it was short. So illustrious here is a very advanced word, but it means famous, successful, somebody with a lot of accomplishments. So what this passage is saying is that the resume is exaggerated. We recommend that you dial back. So like I said for fill in the blanks, that's a collocation or a phrase. Dial back means reduce. The grandiose, right? The big statements. And then on top of that, your references are too illustrious, meaning the people that you list as references are too famous. You're listing people like Jeff Bezos, or something like that. So the point here of explaining that is I was able to figure that out because I understood the context. I read the title, and then I read this sentence, so I understood the context or what this passage was about. It was about a resume that had fake things in it. So that information was really key to help me figure out those incomplete words.
They received praise for their good behavior.
They received praise for their good behavior.
They received praise for their good behavior.
Now, to be honest, how he's pronouncing this is odd. They receive praise for their good behavior. We typically wouldn't pause between received and praise. So I think that's there maybe to try to confuse you potentially, or just add a challenge, right, to really test you. So don't be alarmed if on the test you listen to somebody speaking and it doesn't sound quite right. That can happen. Again, it's a way to really challenge whether you are understanding the words that are being said.
They received praise for their good behavior.
They received praise for their good behavior. All right, next we will go on to interactive reading. You can see here that it says you will have 7 or 8 minutes to answer 6 questions. So how this works is you are given a passage, and the first step is it'll have missing words. So you have to figure out what those missing words are. So it won't have a title, and the first and last sentences will not be complete. So this makes it a little more challenging than reading complete. In addition, is you're not given those letters at the beginning of the incomplete word. However, what makes it easier is that for each word, you're given options. And what's nice is if you open up the options for a blank, you can hover over them, and then Duolingo will put them in the blank so that you can read the sentence in context and test out the different options. So, the Marine Mammal Institute, a blank, an education program at the University of Washington, needs financial support to stay open. The Marine Mammal Institute, a volunteer and education program, a summer and education program, a conservation and education program, a research and education program, a work and education program. So to be honest, we have 4 options that could work here: volunteer, conservation, research, and work. All of these make sense. Summer is the only one that doesn't make sense. So what are we going to do? How do we know what is correct? Well, we will have to keep going and learn, and we'll figure out the rest of the passage, hopefully, and then that will give us the context we need for this question. So there's 2 things to note here is you may need to skip words, just like we talked about in Reading Complete. And Duolingo will make questions challenging, both here and in other questions on the test, by giving you multiple options that could be correct. So what I always say is that sometimes there will be multiple correct answers, but there's only one best answer. And that's the case here. We have 4 options that could work. They could all be correct options, but only one of them is going to be the best. So we'll have to come back to this once we get more information to determine what the best one is. One of the trips the Institute sponsors every summer is the research vessel Oceanus Voyage, which employs researchers to study, which hires researchers to study, which allows researchers to study, brings researchers to study, aids researchers to study. So here, again, grammatically, all of these work. Okay, these all are grammatically correct, but allows is going to be the most natural one. It's going to be the best one. The reason is it's simply a common phrase, right? Which allows researchers to study. That sort of construction, that phrase is very common. All right, I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit to make sure we have enough time for the other questions in this section. That's important that you do that on the test. It's one timer for all 6 questions. So you don't want to get stuck on the first one. All right, so I'm going to move a little faster. To study wildlife in the Sea of Cortez off the coast. Off the coast, that's another phrase. For more than a decade, these responses, these trips to the Sea of Cortez have been important for marine research. The Oceanus voyage is now in its 11th year, but its funding, which comes from the National Science Foundation, runs out this year. All right, let's go back to the first one. The Marine Mammal Institute, a blank. And we now know that the correct answer needs to be research. Why? Well, because there's researchers on the vessel. Okay? So that's a strong clue that the project is for research and education. All right, so the next question, we will be given the correct version of the paragraph that we just filled in, and we'll be given a new sentence, and we have to pick the sentence in between. So what I recommend is that you read this paragraph, again, in case you got something wrong, so that you can make sure you understand it. So a research education program, but it's funding. Cool. So I got everything correct. But again, maybe you didn't. It's important that you fully understand the passage. Don't waste time trying to figure out what you got wrong and got right, and then think about the points that you lost. That's a distraction. Just reread the paragraph to make sure you understand it. Then I'm going to read the new part here. The Institute was able to continue working this year because of the support it got in fundraising, said Jim Harvey, director of the Marine Mammal Institute. So, in the previous paragraph, it says that the funding is running out this year. And then the new information is that actually the Institute was able to continue working. So something happened. Funding came from somewhere. Right? So we just have to kind of think of the story. What could happen in between those two parts of the story? A study shows that since 2000, sea ice has been melting at an accelerating rate. No. Unless something is done, the United States could lose more endangered species. No. This leaves the Oceanus voyage in danger of being canceled. The Sea of Cortez is temperate throughout much of the year. This is the only option that fits, that really makes sense, right? So it adds more information that the funding is running out this year, which means that it could be canceled. And then we learned that it was able to continue, however, because it got some fundraising. All right, next we have 2 Highlight the answer question. So where does the funding from the Oceanus voyage come from? The National Science Foundation. Okay. With this, you just want to highlight what you need to answer the question, no more and no less. Why was the Institute able to stay open this year? Because of the support it got in fundraising. All right. What is the main idea of this passage? The northern sea lion is endangered. No, there's no mention of a sea lion in the passage. The Marine Mammal Institute focuses on conservation issues related to marine mammals such as sea lions and seals. No, again, no mention of sea lions or seals. The research vessel Oceanus allows researchers to study wildlife in the Sea of Cortez. Maybe. The Institute wants to spend 3 months each year monitoring sea lions in the coastal waters of Mexico in California. So this one, no, because they're already doing it. So, right? They don't want to do it, they are doing it. So this one, the third one, will be correct. And I ran out of time. Okay? So the question that I didn't get to answer was select the title. Allow that to be a warning that if you run out of time, you don't get to answer a question, I'm going to get 0 points for that final question. Not good. All right, interactive listening. This is another one. You have one timer to do the conversation. So you have to be mindful of time. So let's learn our lesson from the last one and manage our time better here. So for interactive listening, you will always get a scenario. This will tell you who you're talking to, and it will be either a student or a professor. You'll have one of each on the test. And it'll tell you why you're talking to them. Okay, so I'm an urban studies student. I'm nearing the end of my undergraduate studies, and I'm trying to figure out if I should apply for a job or if I should go into a doctoral program to get a PhD. So I go to talk to my professor. All right, so key information. Urban studies, I'm talking to my professor about whether I should apply for a job or go to graduate school. All right, so sometimes the other person will start, sometimes you will start. In this case, I need to pick the best start. So I have great news to share. No. I'm here about my final paper. No. Professor, what did you want to talk about? No. I'm going to the professor. I want to talk to him. I'd like to share my experience, professor. No. Professor, I hope you are doing well. That's the only one that really makes sense here. And then you will be able to listen to what the other person says one time.
Hi, I'm doing well, thanks. What can I do for you?
And then we need to go through and eliminate the options. Again, let's be mindful of the time. So I'm finishing up my undergraduate degree in accounting. No. I'm nearing the end of my undergraduate studies. Should I apply for a job or doctoral program? This seems correct, but let's make sure. Working on research right now and have questions. No. I've been thinking about that too. No. I'm not sure. That's why I wanted to ask you. I've done a lot of research. No. This one is the only one that really makes sense.
That's a tough decision. Have you been looking at jobs in the field that you're interested in?
Yes, I've been looking, but most of the jobs require at least a few years of experience. So this one is correct, but be careful because this one sounds correct, but it's about programs, not jobs, right? So this one would be correct.
That's true. A doctoral program would give you the opportunity to gain more knowledge and research experience in your field so that you can eventually get a job that you want.
Okay.
It definitely takes a lot of time and commitment, but it can be very rewarding. If you're not sure if an advanced degree is for you, why don't you try working in your field for a few years and then decide whether or not to pursue a doctorate later on?
Okay, great idea. However, I'll see you tomorrow then. That doesn't make sense. So it's important that you read the entire option. So this one, I think, would make the most sense. That's a good idea. Okay, Great, got them all correct. Now, it's important that you save time to reread the entire conversation, because in the next question, you need to summarize the conversation in 75 seconds. So I'm going to reread the whole thing, remind myself who I am and why and who I'm talking to and why I'm talking to them, and then also what we talk about. So it's a summary. You're not going to be able to include all the information. So I just want to pick out the most important things from the conversation. Okay? So for me, that means, right, the following. I was an urban studies student nearing the end of my undergraduate studies. I went to my professor to get his advice about applying for jobs, right? And here's a trick. Instead of saying applying for jobs, I'm going to use a synonym about entering the job market. That way I can get some more points, hopefully, about entering the job market, or entering a PhD program. He recommended that I work for a few years in the field so that I can make an informed decision about committing to a graduate program for several years. Okay. So you can see, I don't mention everything in the conversation, just the main parts. All right, this is a reminder. This appears for everybody. On the test, you need to stay focused on the screen. So this is important for speaking questions. That's why it's appearing here, because we tend to look around like this as we're thinking. You don't want to do that. Okay, writing questions. So I'm going to have two, one write about the photo, one interactive writing. Write description, image below. This image shows a flooded area. I can tell because there is a picnic table standing in a few inches of water. Some of the trees have orange leaves, so this photo was presumably taken in autumn. In the background is a tall, tree-covered mountain. All right, and then I'm going to save time to proofread my response. Always a good idea for writing questions. There we go. Okay, then I'm going to write about the topic below, so I get 30 seconds to prepare and plan my response. So describe a memorable experience you've had in nature, such as a hike, a visit to a park, or an encounter with animals. Include specific details in your response. Okay, so let me think. I'm going to identify the experience, and then I'm going to think about all of the details that I'm going to mention. So I have 5 minutes. I can really share a lot of information here. A memorable experience that I've had in nature was when I hiked the Grand Canyon in high school. It took 3 days for us to descend to the bottom, all the way to the Colorado River, and then to ascend back out. It was a physically challenging hike. Not only because we had to walk with heavy packs on rugged terrain, but also because the weather was surprisingly cold. The first night was spent on the rim of the canyon. It was below freezing, so we slept terribly, and when we woke up, everything was frozen. However, as we descended into the Grand Canyon, the temperatures rose because the canyon acts as a natural oven, absorbing and retaining the heat from the sun. As we went further into the canyon, the hotter and drier it got, until it got uncomfortably so. We eventually made it to the Colorado River, where we were delighted to be able to swim and cool off. Then we cooked quesadillas for lunch. Then we cooked quesadillas for lunch and took naps. It was astonishing to start the day being so cold and then end the day being so warm that we just wanted to swim. While at the river, we saw a group of rafters come by. But apart from that, we saw no one else during our entire trip, which made it all the more magical. The only animal we saw along the way was a rattlesnake. Thankfully, our hiking guide was very experienced and was able to point out the snake so that we could avoid it and no one got hurt. It would have been disastrous if one of us was bitten. All right, then I'm going to save time to proofread. Okay, I ran out of time to proofread the whole thing, but you can see I corrected 2 mistakes and therefore gained some points. All right, reflect on how this memorable experience with nature affected or changed your awareness or understanding of the environment. Include specific details in your response. I think that the main lesson that I gained from this experience was an appreciation of how old the Earth is and how little time humans have existed. The Grand Canyon was formed over millions of years by water running over rock. It was staggering to think about how long that process would have taken and how much longer that process is than things that occur in our humanly lives. This realization made me appreciate the slow yet powerful processes of nature. It also made me appreciate how nature was here long before humans and how nature will continue to live even if we are no longer here. In other words, I came away from the experience with a profound respect for the natural world. And I'll proofread. All right, and now we will do the speaking questions. Here we go.
What are some things you can do to have fun while working on tasks?
All right.
What are some things you can do to have fun while working on tasks? What are some things you can do to have fun while working on tasks?
Okay, let me plan a little bit. The biggest thing, the most impactful thing that I think we can do to have fun while working on tasks is to play music. I listen to music constantly as I am working, and it transforms the nature of the work. It basically takes a task that can feel boring or tedious and turns it into almost a dance party. And often when I am working, I am moving a lot, dancing to the music and really having a lot of fun. So that's the first one. The second one is we can change our working environment. That way we are stimulated by something novel, and that can compensate for tasks that are mundane or mind-numbing. So I like to go to cafes and enjoy different kinds of coffee and enjoy the different ambiances or locations of those cafes as I am working. And finally, we can always work with other people. So if we can take a task and team up on it with somebody else, that is another great way to inject some fun into whatever we are working on. All right, so notice how I stayed focused on the screen the whole time. That's what you want to do on the test. All right, so I'm going to prepare to speak about this image. This one actually seems quite easy because it's quite an interesting photo with a lot going on, but I'm going to stay focused on the screen. This image shows a clown who is playing a guitar and a harmonica. I can tell that this man is a clown because he is wearing a bright red clown nose. Otherwise, his attire is somewhat normal, or at least his attire is not the typical kind of clothing worn by a clown, which is usually very bright and colorful. The clown honestly seems a little sad, which is somewhat odd to have a sad clown, but it makes the photo interesting, in my opinion. The clown appears to be standing in front of some background with shimmery silver elements, maybe beads or something like that. And he is staring at the ground in front of him. I said before that he's wearing clothing that doesn't make it look like he's a clown because he's wearing some kind of blouse with maybe lace fabric in the front and what appears to be a black vest as well as a black hat. And he has long, shoulder-length hair. Then we'll get the read, then speak question. So talk about one scientific discovery or invention that has changed the world. What is this discovery or invention? Why is it significant? I think that a significant scientific discovery is the airplane. This invention has revolutionized our world. In particular, it has transformed our relationship with distance. Before airplanes, it took a long time to travel from one continent to another, or even from one country to another. But with airplanes, we can now travel in a fraction of the time from one place to another, and even in one day, we can go from one side of the world to the other. So this means that people can take vacations for just a week or so, or even just a couple of days to completely different places. And it allows people to work in different places and still go home to visit on a regular basis. And it allows people to experience a greater diversity of things. So my friends, for example, who live in Philadelphia, will go out to Utah or Colorado to go skiing in the winter, and they'll come to Mexico in the summer, and they'll go to Europe in the fall, and maybe they'll even take a trip to Japan in the winter. So they're able to access so much more of the world than they could before. All right, then we will end with the writing and speaking sample. These responses, as it says here, are sent with your scores, but these responses are also scored on the test. All right, name a person from history you admire. Why do you admire that person? What do you think we can learn from them? Interesting question. Okay, let me prepare my answer. All right. So in general, I would recommend use all of the time that you're given to plan your answer. Even if you have the idea clear, there's no reason to go fast. Just use all the time. So a person from history that I greatly admire is Abraham Lincoln. He was president of the United States during our Civil War in the 1860s. He is credited with saving the Union and keeping the country together. However, I admire him for different reasons. Lincoln was almost entirely self-educated. He never attended college. However, he acquired law books and studied them and eventually became a lawyer. On top of that, he became an incredible writer. And my estimation and the estimation of others, he is one of the finest American writers ever. He was also a deeply humble man. Often, people like him who were not born with a lot of privilege will be insecure and have a chip on their shoulder. But Lincoln did not. He did not take it personally when people made fun of him, even fellow politicians. In fact, he actively sought to build relationships with his political enemies because he saw their positive attributes and believed that he could harness their abilities for the benefit of the country. Second, Lincoln was an independent thinker. He did not believe in a traditional definition of God. Rather, he invented his own spirituality, and recognized the dangers of organized religion. He also created his own sense of style. The stovepipe hat for which he is so famous was not typical at the time. He made it popular. For these reasons, I admire Lincoln tremendously. I believe that we can learn from him the importance of humility, hard work, and an ethos of public service. All right, I ideally would save around a minute to proofread, but that's okay. I'll use whatever time I have. All right, and now for the speaking sample. What is the most unusual food that you have ever eaten? Why did you decide to try it? And how was the experience? The most unusual food that I have ever eaten was in Cameroon. It was so unusual that I don't even know the name of what I was eating. I was in the situation which led me to eat this food because I studied abroad in Cameroon for a semester when I was in college. And we took a trip to a rural area to go on a small canoe trip. And when we returned, we had lunch prepared by one of the boat captains. And he brought out some soup with a piece of meat in it. But the meat was honestly terrible. It was like rubber. It was so chewy and it had no flavor. But the soup, the sauce, had a lot of spice. So I was just chewing on spicy rubber, which was terribly unpleasant. I decided to try it because I wanted to be respectful. When we travel, I think it's important that we respect local traditions, and it would have been terribly disrespectful to refuse the food that we were served by one of the boat captains, especially because this food was clearly a delicacy in their culture, even though it wasn't to my liking. So although I didn't enjoy the food itself, the experience of eating it was quite interesting because there was a lot of ceremony around sitting down and the food being presented. And we ate very slowly with lots of talking and sharing. And the others found it very amusing as they watched me struggle to eat the food. I couldn't hide that it was difficult for me. So it was a positive experience and a lot of fun in the end, even if I've had better meals. I did try to figure out what the food was exactly, and I kept asking in French, what is the name? And they would tell me the name, but I didn't know the translation. We didn't have internet reception, so I couldn't use Google Translate. I asked them to describe the animal, and from the best that I could gather, it was some kind of aquatic or amphibious animal that had a thick layer of fat so that it would be buoyant in the water. So I would imagine it's maybe something like a turtle or maybe some kind of mammal. All right, there we go. 150 to 160. High score that you can get on the mock test. I hope you found this helpful. From here, I would recommend that you check out our other videos on the channel, for example, this one here, to help you get ready. All right, I'll see you in a future lesson.